Story 1. The Man Who Stood Behind the Shed. I was 13 when I first saw him. Our house sat crooked on the edge of a frost-bitten field, backed up against a small patch of woods, with a rusted metal shed squatting right at the tree line like it was trying to crawl back into the forest. That winter, the air bit down hard, and the trees stood bare and black against the snow like old bones. Everything was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just silence so thick you could feel it pressing on your ears. The first time it happened, I woke up to the feeling that someone was looking at me. Not a noise, just that weight on your chest when you're being watched. I sat up in bed, my window fogged on the edges but clear in the middle. And I looked out toward the shed like I always did. That shed had always given me the creeps. There, just behind it, was something tall, a shape, not a tree, not a shadow from the moon. It didn't move, just stood there, tall and wrong, too straight, too still. My first thought was that it was a man, but there wasn't any detail. It was blacker than anything else in the night, just a figure cut out of the darkness itself. I told myself I imagined it, but the next night I woke up at the same time, 2:14 a.m. I remember exactly, and it was there again, same place, same posture, and I started to realize something that made the hair on my arms rise. He wasn't behind the shed, he was next to it. The trees were too far back. He was standing between the shed and the house, maybe 20 feet from my window. I didn't say anything to Daddy at first. He was a hard man, not one for ghost stories. But after 4 nights of this, 4 nights of waking up like clockwork and finding that shape standing outside, I told Mama. She brushed my hair back, told me I was probably dreaming, that the winter plays tricks on tired eyes. But the look she gave Daddy when she thought I wasn't looking said she believed me, or at least wanted him to go check it out. He waited until the 5th night, sat up with his old Remington in his lap, a thermos of coffee on the kitchen table, while I pretended to sleep. At exactly 2:14, I felt that same heaviness in my chest and opened my eyes. The shape was there again, but this time, Daddy saw it too. I heard the chair scrape back, the front door open. I watched from the window as he stepped out in his boots, no coat, shotgun pointed low. He walked out to where the figure stood and stopped, didn't say a word, he just looked at it. I couldn't see his face, but I saw how stiff his body went, like he'd hit something cold, even colder than the air. He didn't raise the gun, didn't shout. After maybe a full minute, he turned around and came back inside. Mama met him at the door. I heard her whisper, "Was it a man?" He shook his head just once. Then he said something I'll never forget. "It was looking through me." He wouldn't say more. Went to bed and left the shotgun leaning against the door. The next morning, he told me not to open the blinds at night anymore. Told me not to go near the shed for any reason. I asked if it was a person. He said, "No, son, but it might have been once." I didn't sleep the next night. I lay in bed, eyes wide, heart thumping. 2:14 came and went. Nothing. No shape. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe whatever it was had moved on. But then, on the 7th night, I woke up gasping, like something had sat on my chest. And there it was, again. Only this time, it wasn't by the shed, it was right up against my window. The glass was fogged from my breath, but I could still see the outline. Close enough, I could make out the ridges of its head, the curve of its shoulders. It was so black, it looked like a hole in the world. No face, no eyes. But I knew it was looking at me, not in the way people look, but deeper. It wasn't interested in me like a person is interested in another person. It was studying me like something curious about how I worked. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Just lay there, eyes locked on that shape, until morning crept in and the figure dissolved into the light. The window had a smudge on it, not a handprint exactly, just a smear where the frost had melted like breath. But it was too high, too wide. I begged Mama to let me sleep in the living room. She said no, said the house was safe. But she stopped turning out the hallway light after that. I noticed she started placing salt on the windowsills, something her grandmother used to do, she said, for the old things in the woods. It didn't stop. That winter dragged on longer than usual. Snowstorms came down hard, and we got stuck out there for nearly a week without going into town. The figure didn't come every night, just enough to keep me afraid. Some nights it would stand by the shed again, like it was giving me space. Other nights, I'd see it at different windows. Once, Mama found muddy prints on the porch, barefoot, but not like a man's feet. The toes were longer, more spread out. We started hearing knocking. Always 3 slow knocks, never on the front door. Always at the back or under the windows. Daddy stopped answering them. One night, it knocked on every wall of the house. Circled us, slow and steady, like it was counting. I cried myself to sleep that night with a Bible under my pillow. Eventually, the snow started to melt, and Daddy said we'd go stay with Uncle Ray for a while. But before we left, he burned the shed down, just lit it up without a word. I watched from the back step as the flames licked the night sky, and in the last moment before the roof collapsed, I swear I saw that shape standing inside, not panicking, not trying to get out, just watching me through the smoke. We stayed away for the rest of the season. When we came back, nothing was out of place. No shadow figures, no knocks. But I never felt at ease in that house again. The air always felt thick. The woods are too quiet. Years later, after Daddy passed, I returned to clean the place out. Just me and the sound of the wind. That night, I stayed in my old room, out of some stupid hope, or maybe to make peace. At 2:14 a.m., I woke up with tears in my eyes. The room was cold, and outside the window a shape stood still and tall, just watching. Same place, same distance, only this time it wasn't alone. Story 2. Something crossed the highway, near Elkins. It was late, maybe 10 past midnight, when I started the drive through the mountain pass outside Elkins. I'd been down that stretch of Route 33 more times than I could count, back and forth from my folks' place to the little house I was renting near Bowden, tucked along the ridgeline. I always liked driving at night. The roads were quiet, the cold kept the animals tucked away, and the snow made the whole world soft, like the edges had been filed down. That night, though, something about the air felt different before I'd even hit the foothills. I remember fiddling with the heat, thinking it wasn't working right. But the gauge said the cabin was a steady 71. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was colder than it should have been. The snow wasn't heavy, just that fine, dry kind that floats more than falls. The kind that doesn't stick to the road, just dances around in the headlights. I had a thermos of coffee between my legs and Merle Haggard on the radio, and I was starting to relax into the curves, easing up the incline where the forest pressed in tight on both sides. That stretch near Sugar Run is narrow, winding. The trees lean close there, like they're trying to whisper to each other over the road. No lights, no houses, just rock and pine and shadow. I'd just come out of a bend when I saw it. The thing stepped onto the asphalt like it had been waiting for me, no warning. No movement from the side, just suddenly there, 10 or 12 yards ahead, right in the center of the lane. I hit the brakes hard. The tires skidded a little but held. The truck groaned and the thermos tipped over, burning my thigh through my jeans. But I barely noticed. It wasn't shaped right. It had arms and legs, sure, but the proportions were off. The limbs were long, too long, and the head sat slightly tilted like it didn't know how to hold itself up. But the worst part was how dark it was. The thing didn't reflect the headlights. It didn't glow or shimmer like an animal's eyes might. It looked like a hole, like someone had carved a figure out of the world itself. I couldn't make out the texture, no coat or fabric, no skin or face. Just a flat black cutout against the pale snow and dark trees. I don't know how long I sat there, foot hard on the brake, staring at it. Maybe 20 seconds, maybe longer. It didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, cocked slightly to one side, as if it was trying to understand me the way I was trying to understand it. I wanted to honk, but something in my gut told me not to make a sound. I just inched forward, barely tapped the gas. The truck eased up the slope, and my headlights hit it square. That's when the cold hit. Not from outside, from inside the cab. My breath fogged the windshield in thick bursts. My fingers went stiff on the wheel, the kind of cold that doesn't feel natural. Not just temperature, but something deeper. Like the part of you that believes you're safe got dragged down into a frozen creek and left there. When I reached the spot where it had stood, it wasn't there anymore. Gone. No sound, no shift of shadow. Just gone. I slowed again and looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing behind me, no tracks. Just empty roads and whispering trees. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. That's when I noticed the smell. Damp, earthy, like wet leaves left to rot under snow. And then the passenger seat creaked. I turned my head, real slow. The seat was empty, but soaked. The fabric was dark, matted, like someone had been sitting there in clothes soaked through to the bone. I hadn't noticed at first because of the dark, but now I could see the glistening sheen on the seat, and the smell, stronger now, mold, wet wool, old water, the kind of smell you remember from flooded basements and forgotten cellars. I didn't stop. I didn't look again. I just kept driving, hands locked on the wheel, eyes forward. My mouth was dry and my tongue stuck to the roof of it. I didn't dare say a word, not even to myself. When I pulled into my drive 20 minutes later, the snow was falling heavier. I left the truck running, stepped out without grabbing the thermos, and didn't even glance at the passenger side. I slept with every light on that night, back pressed to the headboard, a hunting knife in my hand, even though I knew damn well it wouldn't help. The next morning, the passenger seat was dry, bone dry, no stains, no smell, nothing, like it never happened. I tried to convince myself I was overtired, maybe nodding off at the wheel, maybe a snowdrift, a trick of light. I told myself that for 3 days straight, until I saw it again, not on the road this time, in the grocery store parking lot. It was dusk, and I was loading bags into the bed when I felt it, that same cold pressure. I turned, and there it was, across the lot, just beyond the edge of the sodium street lamp. It wasn't walking, just there, head tilted, watching. I blinked, and it was gone, just like that. Since then I've seen it 5 times, never for more than a few seconds, always silent, always watching. Once, in the reflection of my microwave. Once, standing still at the edge of the woods behind the house. Another time, on the shoulder of the road leading into Harman, just standing behind a deer like it didn't even know it was there. I don't tell people, not really. They wouldn't believe me, or worse, they'd pretend to. I started driving routes that avoid the woods, but in West Virginia, that's near impossible. Sometimes I feel it before I see it now. Like the air shifts, the silence gets thicker, and sometimes I come back to my truck and find the seat wet again. But the thing that keeps me up most nights is this. Each time I see it, it's standing a little bit closer. Story 3. The hollow behind Grandma's house. Grandma's place sat at the edge of a slope we called the hollow. Wasn't much to it, just a steep drop behind her garden. Maybe 40 feet down, thick with trees and fog most mornings. No trails, no clearings, just dense woods, and a smell like wet stone and old iron. When we were kids, she told us never to go down there. Said the air was wrong, said it settled like something dead, called it bad air, like it had a mind of its own. I thought it was just old folks' talk, one of those mountain sayings meant to keep kids from falling and breaking their necks. My brother Ethan didn't believe her either. It was the summer of '98 when it happened. I was 12. Ethan was 9, still skinny and fast. Always barefoot and climbing things he shouldn't. We were staying with Grandma for a week while our folks worked double shifts down in Elkins. Most days, we'd sit on the porch with her, peeling beans or watching storms roll over the ridge. But that day was hot and still. No wind, no clouds, just cicadas screaming loud enough to rattle your teeth. Grandma had gone into town to fetch something from the pharmacy. We were told to stay out of the heat, but Ethan didn't listen. Said he was going to look for arrowheads down by the edge of the hollow. I told him not to. He just grinned, barefoot as ever, and jogged off toward the slope. He was gone for 6 hours. At first I figured he was hiding, trying to scare me. That was his thing. But when noon came and went, and he hadn't come back up for lunch, I started getting nervous. I stood at the edge of the drop, calling his name. The trees below swallowed sound fast, like they didn't want it escaping. I didn't want to go down there, not really. But I grabbed the old flashlight from the shed and made my way down, one slow step at a time. The hollow was darker than it should have been. The sun was high, but the light barely made it through the canopy. The air was thick, heavy, like walking through a wet wool blanket. It smelled sour, like mildew and copper. The flashlight kept flickering, even with new batteries. I called out for Ethan over and over. No answer, just the creak of branches and a kind of low whistle, like wind that wasn't there. I found him sitting in the dirt at the base of a mossy oak, knees pulled to his chest, fingers digging into the soil. His eyes were wide, staring past me. When I touched his shoulder, he flinched like I'd burned him. He didn't say my name, didn't even seem to know I was there at first. Then he started mumbling, over and over. He was following me. The thin man. The thin man. He didn't blink. It took both of us to climb back up, and he cried the whole way. Wouldn't tell me anything more. Just clutched my arm and kept looking behind us like something might reach up from the trees and pull him back. When Grandma came home and saw him like that, mud-caked, trembling, she didn't ask what happened. She didn't yell. She just locked the back door, pulled the blinds, and lit a candle in a little blue jar I'd never seen before, said a prayer under her breath, and told us to sleep in her room that night. Later, while Ethan finally dozed off, curled against her, I got up to get water. I passed the hallway window and made the mistake of looking out. There, at the edge of the tree line, half hidden behind a dogwood, was a figure, tall, too tall, shoulders sloped like broken hangers. Its arms hung lower than they should have, fingers grazing the tops of the ferns. It didn't move, didn't sway, just stood there, like it had all the time in the world. I ducked down and crawled back to the bedroom without making a sound. My heart didn't stop racing till morning. The next day, Grandma said we were going into town to stay with Aunt May for a while. No explanation, just packed a bag and made us go. I asked her what was in the hollow. She didn't answer, just said, some places weren't meant to be looked at. And then she handed me a little pouch of dried herbs and told me to keep it in my coat pocket and never ever toss it away. We never talked about it again. Ethan wouldn't. He flinched every time he saw a shadow out of place, or the trees bent low in a storm. He never set foot near woods again. 15 years passed. I only went back once, after Grandma died. I was 27, worn thin from life and drifting. I needed to see the place again, needed to know if it had really happened, or if it was just a kid's fever dream made worse by heat and stories. The house was quiet. The garden is overgrown. The slope behind it looked smaller than I remembered. The hollow wasn't foggy that day, just still. Too still. I didn't go down, not all the way, just stood at the top and listened. I thought I heard something down there, not voices, not footsteps, just breathing, slow, wet. That night, I couldn't sleep. The moon was bright, casting shadows too long across the floorboards. Around 2 a.m, I sat on the edge of the bed, thinking I'd get up and read, when I felt it, that cold weight in the air, the same one I'd felt as a boy. I turned to the window. There, just inside the tree line, a figure leaned between the trunks. Same shape, same slumped posture. Its arms were longer than they should have been, and it was watching me. It stayed until morning. I left that day, locked the place up, and never went back. Sometimes, though, I dream of the hollow. Not the place itself, just the feeling of being watched. Sometimes I wake up with dirt under my fingernails. And once, just once, I caught a reflection in the train window heading through the Alleghenies. Something tall, something thin, no face, just watching. Story 4, The Shadows, came when it rained. It started the 1st October. I lived in that old cabin outside Boone. I'd rented the place off a grad student who was moving to Asheville, a weird little A-frame on the edge of a pine ridge about 15 minutes from campus. I liked it because it was cheap and quiet and had this big front window that looked out over the valley. I didn't mind the weather out there. Boone gets rain more than most places. Soft mountain rain, mist clinging low in the trees, air always wet enough to smell the dirt. I noticed them the first week I moved in. It was a Thursday night. The kind where you're just settling into routine, books scattered, tea going cold. I was reading at the kitchen table when the rain started. Not hard, just a steady tap on the metal roof, a rhythm like distant footsteps. I didn't think much of it until the lights flickered once. Then again, when they came back on, I saw something in the window, a shape standing in the yard just past the porch. It wasn't moving, just there. I got up fast and pulled the curtain shut. When I looked again, nothing. I told myself it was a tree, or maybe one of the neighbors cutting through the woods. The cabin sat alone on the hill, but there were trailers down the slope. Kids wandered sometimes. I didn't think about it again until the next storm hit, 3 days later. That time, it was worse. Rain came hard that night, beating the windows sideways, wind pushing so strong the trees bowed. I was alone. My roommate Jacob had gone back to Raleigh for the weekend, and I was just about to call it when I heard something. Not thunder, not footsteps either, just this weight, like the air changed in the hallway. I looked up from the couch and saw something in the window again, but it was closer this time, just inches from the glass. A shape in the shape of a man, but not quite. Too still, too black, like it wasn't made of anything at all. It didn't reflect light, it didn't move, it didn't blink. I turned every light on in the cabin and locked myself in my room. Sat on the bed with the door shut tight and the lamp on, trying not to breathe loud. I didn't sleep that night, just waited for the rain to stop. By morning, the cabin looked normal again, except for the footprints. Muddy, human-looking footprints, one after the other across the floor, tracking from the front door all the way down the hall. They stopped at my bedroom door. I hadn't heard it open. There was no mud on the handle, no footprints going back. I told Jacob when he got back. He laughed at first, said it was probably just me having a nightmare or walking in mud half asleep. But the next storm came fast, and he was there for it. That night, the lights went out completely. We sat with candles and flashlights, playing cards and pretending not to notice the wind moaning outside. Around midnight, something knocked on the window. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, like it knew we were listening. Jacob got up to check, even though I begged him not to. Said it was probably a branch or some kid messing around, but I saw the blood drain from his face when he pulled the curtain aside. "There's nothing there," he said, voice hollow. He sat back down and didn't say another word. We stayed up till dawn. After that, he didn't laugh about it anymore. We agreed to leave the cabin during storms, sleep at a friend's or spend the night on campus. But one week, during finals, we slipped. Both of us were too busy to leave. A front came in fast around 6. By 8, the power was gone again. Jacob was in the shower when I saw the first one in the window, then another in the hallway, then one standing in the middle of the kitchen, still as bone. No footsteps, no sound, just the weight of them, like they filled the air with something wrong. I locked myself in my room again, sat with my back to the door while Jacob sang something low in the shower, unaware. Then he stopped singing, and I heard the door creak open. I shouted his name. Nothing, just the sound of water. I wanted to open my door, but I didn't. I couldn't. My arms wouldn't move. The next morning, Jacob was gone. His phone was still on the charger. His backpack sat by the table. The water was still running in the shower, but he wasn't in it. No signs of struggle, no note. Just his toothbrush floating in the sink, and a set of wet footprints leading from the bathroom out the front door. He never came back. Cops said he probably left in the middle of the night, that he got overwhelmed, stressed. But his car keys were still on the hook, and I knew Jacob. He wouldn't walk out into the dark without his jacket or his shoes. They called it voluntary disappearance. I called it something else. I stayed at a motel in town for the rest of the semester, moved my stuff out with friends in broad daylight on a sunny afternoon, but I couldn't throw everything away. I kept a few boxes in the back of my new place. One night, a week before graduation, I was going through them, trying to find a journal I thought I'd lost, when the rain started tapping the window again, and I heard it, Jacob's voice, faint, almost lost in the sound of the storm. He was whispering my name. I stood still, heart caught in my throat, listened closely. It was his voice. Not similar, maybe not, him, calling me from outside, from the rain. I opened the window just a crack. The wind hit hard, carrying mist and the smell of wet leaves. I didn't see anything at first. Then, across the street, just under the streetlight, I saw a shape, not moving, not waving, just standing there, facing me. Same outline, same darkness, same silence. I shut the window and turned away. But the next morning, I found a single muddy footprint on the inside of the sill. I moved again. I don't live in the mountains now. I stay inland, far from trees, far from lonely cabins and rain-slick roads. But I still hear him sometimes when the storms get heavy, calling my name. Not like someone in pain, not like someone begging, just calling, like he's trying to find me again. And every time it rains, I check the floor by the window, just in case. Story 5. The one in the church basement. The church sat alone, half sunk in a shallow bend off River Road, where the valley held onto fog longer than it should. It was the oldest building still standing that side of town. White clapboard, copper bell long stolen, steeple blackened from some forgotten fire. Nobody really knew who built it or when, just that it was always there. Folks stopped attending regular service a few decades back, but it stayed open for weddings and funerals, and the occasional sermon when Pastor Ellis got nostalgic. I was 26 when I volunteered to help clean it. They'd had a flash flood that spring. Waters rose out of the little coal river and seeped up through the floorboards like the land wanted to swallow the place whole. The main hall was fine. It was the basement that caught the worst of it. No one else wanted to go down there, and I figured it was just mildew and rot. I had no reason not to help. The stairs groaned under my boots as I carried the mop bucket down. The light was bad. One naked bulb on a pull chain that swung every time I moved. The walls were rough stone and the air smelled thick, like wet copper and something deeper, like what you smell after turning dirt that hasn't seen daylight in years. I remember thinking it felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just wrong. Heavy. Like the air had a weight you could lean against. The room was big, bigger than I expected. Rows of unused chairs stacked in a corner, a rusted sink, old hymnals in cardboard boxes buckled from the damp. I set the bucket down and started sweeping, the bristles making a soft rasp over the concrete. That's when I saw it. At the far wall, just above the baseboard, there was a stain. At first, I thought it was water damage, but it was too dark, too clean around the edges, and it looked like a person, not a clear shape, not like a shadow you cast with a body, but a void in the shape of one, a silhouette pressed into the wall. No light bounced off it. It didn't shimmer or shine. It was just there, flat, like it had always been there. I blinked. It moved, not walked, just shifted, like it had leaned forward in the time it took me to close and open my eyes. I dropped the broom. I backed toward the stairs, slow and careful. My boots slid a little on the wet concrete, but I didn't dare look away. I couldn't. The stain leaned again, closer. Still no sound, just the bulb swaying above, casting shadows that bent the wrong way when they crossed it. It didn't come at me like a man would, didn't lunge or reach. It's just slid across the room without moving, like smoke drawn backward through a hole in the world. I don't remember the rest. 1 second, I was on the stairs. Next, I was in my truck, hands shaking on the wheel, headlights off, keys in the ignition but not turned. There was mud on the floorboards, thick and dark, and my boots were soaked through. I hadn't locked the church. I don't remember driving. I don't remember starting the engine. But the sun was up, and the birds were chirping like nothing had happened. I didn't go back. A week later, Pastor Ellis said they were locking the basement for good. Said too much mold, too much risk. I didn't tell him what I saw. Didn't tell anyone. Not until now. But here's the thing. I still go to service sometimes. I sit near the back, where I can see the old wooden floor and the pulpit and the stained glass windows that catch the light in strange colors. And sometimes, only when it rains, you can hear it. A shuffling, soft and slow, from under the floorboards. Like someone walking barefoot through mud, always 3 steps. Then silence. The newer congregation says it's just the old wood settling. But I know better. Sometimes, if I sit real still and let my eyes unfocus, I swear I see that same shape at the base of the pulpit. Just for a second, like it's watching, like it never really left that basement. Just wait for the next open door. Story 6. They walked the tree line at dusk. It was the fall of 2004 when I stayed at the cabin in Pocahontas County. Deep woods, quiet enough that the silence felt heavy. That kind of place you don't find by accident. You either know someone who owns land out there or you're lost. My uncle did some guiding for out-of-state hunters and let us use his place during the off-season. When I say cabin, I don't mean some cozy log getaway. I mean a one-room shack with a rusted tin roof, an outhouse 10 paces into the dark, and a stove that coughed smoke into the rafters if the wood was too green. There was no cell service, no power but what we brought in our packs. Just 4 walls and the long hush of the mountain all around. I went up with 2 buddies, Mark and Billy. We all grew up in Raleigh County, spent our teen years bushwhacking through hollers and skinning our knees on creekstone. We'd camped plenty, hunted even more. Nothing about the woods ever scared us. Not really. Not until that trip. It started the second evening. We'd finished setting up camp, dragging up firewood, testing the old stove, hanging the lanterns. We were sitting on the porch with tin cups of rye, watching the sun bleed through the pines. Mark was halfway through telling a story when he stopped and pointed toward the ridge behind the clearing. I saw them then, 3 figures, standing still at the tree line. They were just shadows at first, not moving, not clear. But once your eyes settled, you realized they were too tall for stumps, too narrow for a bear, too still for anything living. I remember the air going still when I noticed them. No birds, no breeze, just that thick, waiting silence you only hear when something bigger than you is nearby. They moved just before dark, not toward us, not away. They paced, all 3 of them side by side, slowly walking the edge of the trees. Their rhythm was perfect, like they were connected somehow. 10 paces one way, pause, 10 paces back. They never broke formation, never looked at us. Mark said, "It's just some folks from down the ridge, maybe a family," but his voice didn't carry any weight. Billy stood there squinting like he was trying to explain it with logic, but couldn't quite get the pieces to fit. They vanished when the dark came down fully, just faded into the trees like they'd never been there. Next morning, we walked the clearing. No tracks, no broken branches, no sign of anyone ever being there. We figured maybe it was shadows, some trick of the light on the rise, but that night, they came back. Same spot, same motion, same perfect timing. Every night after that, just as dusk dipped low, we saw them. Always 3, always pacing, always staying just outside the firelight. And the longer we stayed, the more we felt it. The sense that they weren't watching the cabin, not exactly. They were waiting, watching the land. Like it was theirs. On the 5th night, I did something stupid. We'd been arguing earlier about whether we should stay. Mark wanted to go and said it wasn't worth it. Billy was curious, said he'd seen mountain folk before, even old hermits, but never anything like that. I didn't want to be the one to say I was scared, so I took a bag of raw meat from the cooler, some venison we hadn't cooked yet, and walked it out to the tree line. I didn't go all the way, just far enough to leave the bag at the edge of the grass. I laid it down slowly, real deliberate, then backed away. The shapes didn't move that night, just watched. But when we woke up in the morning, the meat was gone. Not torn apart, gone. The plastic bag was laid flat like it had never been filled, not a drop of blood, no drag marks, no sign of anything touching it. Billy found the prince. He was kneeling by the edge of the trees, real quiet, when he waved us over. At first, I didn't see them. Then I did, and I wished I hadn't. They weren't tracked the way deer or even people leave them. They were long, flat impressions in the ground, not round, not hoofed, just narrow slides through the leaves and soil, almost like someone had walked on sled runners. Some were over 4 feet long, spaced too far apart for any natural stride, no toes, no heels, just smooth depressions, like weight had been pressed down without ever touching the earth. I think that's when curiosity stopped being curiosity. That night, they didn't pace. They stood still, not frozen, not resting, still, like statues, or like people listening very closely. The fire burned low because none of us could bring ourselves to move, and for the first time I noticed something else. There was no sound, none. The wind had died, the crickets had stopped. Even the trees weren't creaking, just silence, like the world had pulled a blanket over itself and was waiting for something to pass. We left the next morning. Didn't pack properly, didn't speak. Just loaded up and drove the four-wheeler down the trail until the signal bars flickered back on and we could pretend we were in the real world again. We never went back. A few years later, I ran into Billy at a hardware store down in Lewisburg. We talked a while, real casual, like old friends do. Then I asked if he ever told anyone about what we saw. He said he tried once. Told his uncle who grew up around those parts. His uncle didn't laugh, didn't call him crazy. Just said, they still do that then. Billy didn't ask what he meant. We don't talk about it now, not really. But sometimes when the light fades behind the ridge and the trees turn black, I look toward the line where the woods begin and the grass ends. And I swear I still see them. 3 shapes. Always 3. Pacing, waiting, measuring. Story 7. The Thing in the Mirror. On Route 50. I've driven Route 50 more times than I can count. Born and raised in Grafton with families scattered from Parkersburg to Romney, that stretch of twisting blacktop through the West Virginia hills has always been part of my life. It ain't the kind of road that shows up in tourist brochures. Narrow in places, pitch dark once the sun goes down, with switchbacks sharp enough to make your stomach lurch if you're not paying attention. But I never minded it. Not until that night in November when I saw something in my rearview mirror that's been with me ever since. I was coming back from Clarksburg after a late shift. I picked up some overtime hauling equipment for a construction crew out near Bridgeport. Finished around 10, stopped for gas and a sandwich, then figured I'd make the drive home while the road was empty. It was cold that night. Thick frost already on the grass by the time I hit the highway. No snow yet. But the air had that smell, that silence that settles in before winter truly sets in. You know the one. I was maybe 20 minutes out of Salem, climbing the ridge westbound, when I noticed it. Just a flicker in the mirror at first. A shape. I didn't panic. I figured it was the backseat blanket bunching up, or maybe the low light playing tricks with the glass. But something about it didn't sit right. I looked again. The shape hadn't moved. Still and upright, like someone sitting very still behind me. I told myself it was nothing, turned up the heat and tried to focus on the road. The ridgeline is tight up there, and it's easy to drift if your mind starts to wander. But then I looked again, just a quick glance, and the shape was still there. Only now, I could see that it wasn't slumped or slouched like a coat or bag might be. It was straight-backed, human-sized, black, not shadow black, absence black, like it had been cut out of the world. I snapped my head around to check the seat, heart thudding, empty, nothing there but the old flannel blanket I kept for emergencies. But when I looked back at the mirror, it was still sitting there. As if the mirror saw something real that my eyes couldn't. I kept driving, now with my stomach tight. Every instinct I had was telling me to stop, to get out, to run. But where was I supposed to go? Middle of the mountains, no signal, nothing but woods and fog stretching for miles. So I gripped the wheel, knuckled white, and stared straight ahead. I flipped the rearview up to face the ceiling. It was a childish move, but I couldn't bear to see it sitting there any longer. For a while, that seemed to work. I didn't see it. I started breathing easier. Then I caught it in the passenger side mirror. Same shape, same size, as if it had slid over, quiet and unseen, not touching anything, just there. I reached over and adjusted the mirror, angling it toward the door. I drove without mirrors after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I looked long enough, I'd see it shift. Maybe raise its head, maybe lean forward. The weirdest part was how quiet everything got. No road noise, no engine rumble, like the truck was moving through cotton. Even the tires felt like they were floating. I tapped the brakes once, just to feel something bite, and they responded, but even that felt delayed, like I wasn't fully in control anymore. And the cold. The cab was warm. I had the heater on full blast, but the air turned wet and clammy, like the inside of a cave. I could see my breath. The windows began to fog despite the defrost. The only clear patches were the ones near the mirrors. Like something wanted to see. I hit the gas. Didn't care about the curves or the deer that might be wandering the shoulder. I just needed to get off that road, down into the towns, somewhere with lights, with people, anywhere but that mountain. As I sped up, I caught a glimpse of the windshield, just a shimmer, barely there, but it was enough to see a reflection in the glass. It had moved. Now it was behind the driver's seat, leaning slightly forward. Close enough that, if it were real, I'd feel its breath on my neck. I drove like a madman through the last stretch before the descent. My eyes flicked to the glass, once, twice, just to be sure, and each time it stayed exactly where it was. No face, no limbs, just presence, solid and watching. The last thing I remember before I hit town was seeing smear marks appear on the inside of the windshield. Not handprints, just two long arcs, like where a wet forehead might have rested. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't move. I sat there with the engine idling until the frost reclaimed the edges of the windshield and the headlights dimmed. Then I opened the door and stepped out slowly, knees trembling. I left the truck running, lights on, just in case. I checked the back seat with a flashlight. Nothing, of course. I stood there for a long time, breathing hard, until the cold cut through and brought me back to myself. The next morning, I found something that stopped me cold. The smears were still there, inside the glass. Two arcing marks just about head height, faint and wide, like condensation that had dried but never disappeared. I tried everything, Windex, bleach wipes, even vinegar. They faded, sure, but they always came back, especially at night, especially when it rained. I covered the mirror after that, took it off eventually, same with the side mirrors, drove without them. People thought I was reckless, but I'd rather risk a blind spot than risk seeing it again. Weeks went by, then months, but sometimes when I was driving at night, I'd catch a flicker in the window, a shape that didn't belong. Once, I saw it reflected in the screen door glass at my aunt's house. Another time, I glimpsed it in the freezer door at the store when the light hit just right. Never outside, never with my eyes, only in glass. Only when I wasn't looking for it. I started hearing things in my house, nothing loud, just the sound of breath where there shouldn't be any. Sometimes footsteps in the hallway when I was dead, sure I was alone. The dog wouldn't go near the bathroom mirror. He'd growl at it, low and mean, then whimper and run. I tried burning sage. I had a preacher bless the place. Nothing worked. One night, I caught my reflection staring back at me too long, not moving with me, not blinking right. I smashed every mirror in the house after that, covered the TV in a sheet, took down picture frames. I live in a world without reflections now. I shave with my eyes closed. I don't take pictures. I don't look out the windows after dark. I don't look behind me, because I think it's still there, and I think it wants me to. Story 8. Behind the door at the fire tower. I took the job because I needed to get away. My uncle called it a solitude fix. Said being 20 feet up in a steel box with only trees and wind for company would do me good. And for the first few weeks, he was right. There's something oddly calming about being removed from the world. No traffic, no phones, no people. Just birdsong in the morning and cricket choruses at night. That fire tower sat in the Monongahela backcountry, a good half-day hike from the nearest trailhead. I had food drops every 2 weeks, a radio that barely worked, and a cot that creaked louder than the floorboards. But it was mine for that season. and I was glad to be there. First, the knocking started in late September. It was a quiet night, cool, windless, with the sky so clear you could see every star spill across it. I'd just settled in with a cup of stale instant coffee and a water-warped paperback when I heard it. 3 knocks, not fast, not panicking, just deliberate, spaced out, like someone tapping on a door they already knew was locked. Now, you have to understand, the only way up to the tower was a narrow metal staircase, 20 feet of straight climb. That trapdoor under my feet was always bolted shut after dark. I never left it open. Too many raccoons and the occasional bear curious enough to wander under. I stood still, waited. Then it came, again. 3 knocks, slow, hollow. I set my coffee down and walked to the trapdoor, crouching low. I called out, "Who's there?" Nothing, just the wind brushing across the top of the trees and the groan of metal expanding in the cold. I stayed like that for a while, ears straining for anything, a shifting step, a voice, even the clatter of something climbing down. But nothing followed. Eventually, I chalked it up to the tower creaking or a branch bouncing off the frame, but that wasn't the last time. 2 nights later, I heard breathing, not my own, not the soft shuffle of wind or leaves. Breathing, slow and ragged, coming from just beneath the trapdoor, like someone crouched close, listening through the slats. It had that sound, the kind of inhale people make when they're standing too close, when their ribs rise slowly and the exhale hits your neck. I didn't speak this time, I didn't move, just sat there on my cot, back against the wall, eyes locked on that patch of floor like it might give out beneath me. It went on for what felt like an hour. No knocking, no footsteps, just breathing. Then, nothing. Dead silence. The next morning, I checked around the base. Nothing out of place. No claw marks, no footprints in the dirt, not even scuffing on the lower rungs of the ladder. But something about the clearing felt off. The way the air sat heavy. The way the birds stayed quiet until nearly noon. That night, I bolted the trapdoor with 2 extra latches I made from scrap, and I didn't sleep. Just sat with the lantern low, staring at that damn floor. Then, sometime around 3 a.m., I saw it. There's a gap in the trapdoor. Slats. Just wide enough to catch shapes if someone's directly beneath. I'd stuffed a rag in it after the first incident, but it had slipped free. I was on my stomach, watching. My eyes had adjusted to the dark. I could see nothing at first, just the black hole of the stairwell. Then something shifted. It was tall. That much was clear. Shoulders hunched, head nearly brushing the trapdoor from below. Blacker than the dark around it. Like light wouldn't touch it. No glint of eyes, no features. Just the rough shape of something man-sized, crouched and still. It didn't move, didn't knock, just stayed there. Waiting. I didn't sleep again after that. For the rest of the week, I kept the lantern lit and stayed by the cot with my hunting knife close. Radioed into the ranger station, told them there might be someone screwing around near the tower at night. They said they'd send someone out for the next supply run. I didn't mention the shape. I tried rationalizing. Maybe it was a drifter, a lost hiker. But even the hungriest folks don't stand 20 feet up in the dark waiting under a bolted door, not moving, not speaking. And besides, how did they get up there? No rope, no ladder marks. And I sure as hell didn't hear the metal staircase groan. The next few nights passed quietly, just wind and owls and me half dozing with a hammer in my hand like it might help. Then came the scratching. It started around 2:30 a.m., gentle, like nails across rusted steel. Not frantic, just methodical, back and forth across the trapdoor. I watched the slats again, this time I didn't see anything, but the sound was real. It vibrated through the frame, through the floor, into my bones. The sound stopped right before sunrise. I opened the trapdoor in daylight, stood on the top rung and looked straight down, clean. No marks, no footprints, no sign of anything. But I knew. You don't forget the feeling of something watching, not through glass, not through walls, through wood and iron. I lasted another 6 days. Kept it to myself. The radios were unreliable anyway. It felt like no one would believe me, or worse, they'd come out, find nothing, and leave me there alone again. On my final night, the wind died completely. It was unnerving how still the woods got. Not a single creak, not even the hiss of the trees rubbing together. I sat in the middle of the floor, lantern on full, every muscle wound tight, and then I heard the knock. Not 3 this time, 5, faster, louder, a rhythm almost. I stood and backed to the far wall. It knocked again, 5 more, just as fast. Then breathing, heavy, ragged, just like before. But this time, it was closer. It wasn't under the door anymore. It was above it, somehow in the room, though I never heard the latch, never saw the hatch move. I couldn't breathe, couldn't even cry out. Just stood there, knife in one hand, light in the other, watching the shadows stretch and bend across the walls. Then everything went dark. Not the lantern, that still burned, but outside, the stars, the trees, the whole world beyond the windows turned pitch, like the tower had been swallowed. And in that dark, I saw it, not directly, just movement, a tall figure near the trapdoor, not stepping, not walking, shifting, like smoke being pulled backward. It turned toward me, no face, no eyes, just a silhouette made of hunger and cold, and then it was gone. I didn't sleep. I waited out the night with my back to the wall, blade shaking in my hand. At dawn, light came back. The trees returned. The birds chirped like nothing had happened. The ranger showed up that afternoon, brought my next food drop and asked how I'd been. I lied, told him it was peaceful, told him I liked the quiet. When he left, I packed everything and hiked out behind his truck. I never went back, never climbed another fire tower, and I've never been able to shake the sound of that breath, slow, deep, and watching, like something waiting for me to close my eyes. And sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night in my own bed, I swear I hear it again, coming from the attic,